They called it safe. They said the fences were for our protection, that the cameras were for our peace of mind, that the ration cards were proof of fairness. But we knew better. The containment city wasn't built for us. It was built to keep us in. And once you were inside, you understood what it meant to live under control. I remember the first day we came to the city. The buses were gray, featureless. They had no markings, no windows, just long sealed tubes with seats that rattled. We rode for hours. No one spoke. You didn't speak on the bus. Cameras faced every row with their little blinking eyes. When the bus finally stopped, a gate groaned open. The fences stretched high, woven steel laced with barbed wire. Watchtowers rose at the corners, each crowned with a blinking red light. The doors hissed open, and the guards waved us out. The air smelled of dust and smoke, a dry tang that clung to the tongue. That was the first taste of the containment city. The city was laid out in grids, rows of prefab housing units, all the same gray color, stacked like shoeboxes. Narrow streets cut between them, patrolled by slow-moving security drones. Every house had a number, not a name. No porches, no gardens, just doors that locked automatically each night. The streets were always quiet. People walked quickly, their heads down, no loitering. Cameras perched on every corner, swiveling as you passed. Even the children were silent. The silence was the hardest part for us. They controlled everything. The food they handed out once a week at a depot. Bags of powdered protein, loaves of nutrient bread, cans of rehydrated vegetables. You stood in line for hours, your card scanned by a guard in a mask. Water was rationed by the tap. Each house allowed only so many liters a day. If you used more, the taps locked until the following morning. The electricity was limited to 6 hours a day. The lights flickered on at dusk and off again at midnight. After that, you just sat in the dark, listening to the hum of drones outside. The curfew was enforced by a siren. At 9 p.m., it was a long, low wail that echoed through the streets. You had 30 minutes to be indoors. After that, anyone outside was taken. No one ever saw them again. The work was mandatory. Most were assigned to sorting centers, warehouses where shipments arrived daily, where you sorted by color, by weight, by code, boxes in, boxes out, no labels, no questions. Some worked in recycling plants, tearing apart old machines and separating copper from steel and plastic from glass. The air was thick with dust, and the noise was constant, and the hours were long. The lucky ones worked in service, cleaning the streets, repairing drones, cooking in the communal kitchens. The unlucky ones were sent outside the fence, under guard, to work the corporate farms. They left at dawn and returned at nightfall. their hands blistered and their eyes hollow. No one ever dared refuse. I saw quite a few people get disappeared from the city over the last couple months since I've been here. One was a teacher. Her name was Martha. She had been a teacher before the fences. She taught literature and history, the old subjects. She still carried a bag of worn books, pages marked with her handwriting. Inside the city, she wasn't allowed to teach because schools were banned. Education will be standardized digitally, the sign said. But there were no devices, no lessons, only silence. But still, Martha tried. She gathered children in the evenings and read to them in hushed tones. She told them stories of kings and wanderers, of heroes who defied tyrants, of lands where the sky was free. But one night the drones came. They scanned her house, their beams cutting through the shutters. They dragged her out barefoot, her bag of books clutched to her chest. The next day, the bag was burned in the square, and the ashes were scattered in the wind. No one ever saw Martha again. Then there was the baker. Before the fences, Thomas ran a bakery in the town. He had kneaded dough by hand, rising before dawn. His shelves were stacked with loaves warm from the oven. Inside the city, there were no ovens, no flour, only rationed bread. But Thomas couldn't stop his hands from remembering. He would press the ration loaves, reshaping them and softening them with what little water he saved. He added herbs grown in secret jars on his windowsill, like basil and little rebellions of green. Neighbors would come to taste, closing their eyes, remembering what life used to be like. One evening, a guard came to his door. The jars were confiscated, and his rations were cut for misuse. A week later, Thomas was gone. And then there were the brothers. They were two boys no older than 12, and they lived in the unit across from mine. Their parents had been sent outside to work the farms. They never returned. The boys survived by collecting scraps and trading them in the alleys. They moved like shadows, quick and silent, their faces gaunt. One night I heard them whispering. "We'll climb the fence," the older one said. "When the lights flicker, we'll run." The younger nodded, though his eyes were wide with fear. They tried, but the sirens blared, and the spotlights caught them halfway up the steel. The next morning, their unit was empty. The doors were locked, and their numbers were reassigned. Then there was the fear. The fear lived in every corner. You can feel it in the way people walked. They were quick and hunched, and in the way they spoke, in whispers, glancing always at the cameras. In the way the children no longer laughed. They only stared. The fear wasn't of death. Death would have been mercy. The fear was of disappearing, of being taken in the night, of being erased so thoroughly that no one dared to even speak your name again. My family, we survived the same way everyone did, by obeying. We stood in line at the depot with our heads down. We rationed water, measuring each drop. We sat in the dark after midnight, listening to the silence press in. My wife rarely spoke. My children grew pale, thin, and quiet. And me, I just watched. I listened. I remembered the farm, and the fields, and the wide sky. Inside the city, the sky was only a strip of gray above the fences. I longed for the stars. Sometimes they gave us rewards. A family might be granted extra rations, or a worker might be given a small electric heater for the winter. A child might be handed a sweet, bright candy wrapped in foil. The guards smiled as they handed these out, the cameras recording every moment. But the rewards weren't mercy. They were reminders. They were reminders that your life was not your own, that everything you had came from them and could be taken away just as easily. There were whispers of resistance, messages scrawled on the backs of ration cards, symbols carved into the concrete, shadows moving after curfew. I heard of one group that tunneled beneath the fence, their hands bloody from digging. They made it out. For weeks, no one knew if they lived. Then one morning, their bodies were displayed in the square. The message was clear. At some point, I reached a breaking point, though. It was winter when I finally broke. The cold seeped into everything. The ration bread grew moldy, and the water lines froze. The lights would flicker and then die. One night, my son asked me, "Why are we here, Dad?" I had no answer for him. There was a silence that stretched between us, and it was heavier than any fence. That was when I knew that I couldn't keep them here, even if it meant death. It was better to die in the fields under the open sky than to rot behind the walls. The containment city was not a city. It was a cage. It was a place where hope was rationed, where silence was law, where even dreams were punished. But cages cannot hold forever. Not when there are still people that will remember what freedom tastes like. Not when the sky still waits beyond the fence. The city taught us one thing, that control is never complete. Not while there are still hearts beating, and not while there are still hands willing to break the bars.